Okay guys, so today we're going to be talking about the start of the Piggy Infection because it wasn't actually Mr. P that started it. Mr. P is actually innocent. I'm actually surprised that no one else has really made a video on this. I completely forgot to be honest with you. It was on my list and I completely forgot, but I'm doing it now. I remember. Now, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, if you're just completely unaware of what I'm mentioning here, this all ties back to the Book 2 lore update. Of course, there are some secret pages that you can find around all the maps, and if you complete all the pages, it fills out this book here in Roblox Piggy that gives a lore breakdown of each chapter. And inside Book 2, Chapter 6, The Factory, there's an entire page of lore about everything that went on in this chapter. And I'm going to read the beginning of it here because it kind of starts off this whole theory. This is what it says. It says, Willow, almost teasingly, gave us a head start in our duel. She fired her weapon into the air, destroying the light above us and covering the scene in darkness. The whispers started to take over again. This time, he and not responsible were all I could make out. As Pony and I made our way around the factory, we came across many of the Silver Paws members in danger. I still wonder how they got into those situations. I felt a cold presence when approaching them. Regardless, we saved them all while taking care of Willow, and then it just goes on to explain the rest of the chapter. Of course, we all know what happened in Chapter 6. Now, two things are revealed here. Number one, it's not actually Tigery that trapped all the TSP members in Chapter 6, The Factory. It was actually, in fact, this cold presence. Probably the Insolence. I think we can all kind of assume that, aka Mr. Stitchy here. And then the more important part, it says the whispering was saying he and not responsible. Now, of course, he and not responsible. Who is this referring to? Well, I'm not going to beat around the bush or anything here. I'm pretty sure that he and not responsible is directly referring to Mr. P. Mr. P, the he in this situation, is not responsible for the infection. Now, of course, up until this point, we all have assumed that Mr. P was the one responsible. That's what Book 1 kind of led us to believe. He made the potions. After he made the potions, it all started. Everyone started going crazy. And of course, he's had this mental breakdown. He turns into a robot. Lots of stuff has happened, okay? Lots of crazy stuff happened in Book 1.
It's all coming back to me. I'm sorry. It's okay, dude. I left the hospital with researchers when I thought you were infected, Sketch. What, me? What are you talking about, man? No matter how much they changed me, nothing could protect me from my mistakes.
Now, as we've learned more and more about the Insolence, I've kind of started to think maybe Mr. P wasn't responsible. And this here cements it. This is it right here. He is not responsible. It literally says that on the page. Now, quick recap of how the infection actually started out for the people that haven't played the true ending or you haven't seen the true ending in a while. Maybe you never beat the true ending. Basically, how it worked out is Mr. P, this guy here, the potato, Mr. Potato here, his wife is sick with a disease. All right, she has something wrong with her and he is making a cure. Now, before he can give her the cure, he needs to test to make sure that there's no ill side effects. So that's where the Piggy family comes in. They volunteer to take the potion. Now, they take the potion at the hospital, they go back home, and then that's where it all starts, okay? That's actually where this chapter here, the Distorted Memory chapter. I don't know if you guys remember this chapter or not, but it was actually a chapter in between Chapter 11 and Chapter 12 in Book 1. It's no longer available. You can play it in the Piggy 100 player mode if you want to, but it's not in the main game anymore. And basically what this chapter is about is you play as Georgie, and he's having a nightmare about the night that his parents, his whole family turned into infected piggies, and the infection started. And at the end of the chapter, George, of course, escapes. Penny, his sister, of course, escapes. They both seem to be fine, and then the chapter ends with George seemingly becoming infected, and then he wakes up. He wakes up, and that's the end of the dream. Now, the big thing here, the big note, is outside of the house in this chapter, if you look up in the sky, you can actually see two red eyes looking down at the house. Now, up until this point, we just kind of assumed that this was Mr. P. Maybe George is having a nightmare, and he sees these two evil red eyes as Mr. P because of what he did to his family. I mean, it makes sense. Mr. P would be viewed as an evil guy in his eyes because of everything he did. But with this new information, one of these two red eyes is actually Mr. Stitchy. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Okay, Creekcraft, this is starting to make a little bit of sense. Mr. Stitchy is watching, this Piggy family. This is where the infection started, and of course, if the Insolence and Mr. Stitchy is behind it, it would make sense for him to be watching them. Okay, this makes sense. So what I think happened here, and this is just my personal theory on the matter, is I think the Insolence, Mr. Stitchy, whoever you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, is behind all of this, right? They tampered with the potion. They did something with the potion to cause the infection to start. Or maybe it's just all magic, and, we're going to discover that in a future chapter. Either way, Mr. Stitchy, the Insolence, they're surrounding the house, just like they surrounded the TSP members in the factory. And then the Distorted Memory chapter kind of recounts this. George wakes up, his family's infected, they're all infected piggies, and, well, he has to escape, and then that's the chapter. Now, this explains a few things. Namely, at the end of this chapter, the Distorted Memory chapter, George actually sees himself becoming infected. Now, one of the questions that everyone has is, how did George see himself becoming infected if he never took the potion? Because he never took the potion. His sister also never took the potion, and he also never got attacked by an infected piggy. So how in the world could he have become infected? Well, if Mr. Stitchy is surrounding the house, if he's watching this family, it's highly possible. And if this is some magic stuff, then maybe Mr. Stitchy is actually the one that infected the family. Maybe it actually had nothing to do with the potions, which would explain why George is having all these nightmares, right? Mr. Stitchy is starting to get inside of his head. He's starting to see himself become infected because he is becoming infected because Mr. Stitchy is getting inside of his head just like he did with his family. That's why he sees those red eyes up in the sky. Now, there's one big problem with this theory, and that's, of course, that Mr. Stitchy doesn't have 2 red eyes. But, now, here's the big but, all right? At the end of book 1, whenever this chapter came out, Mr. Stitchy, of course, hadn't been fully developed. Book 2 wasn't even a thought really yet. And if you guys know where Mr. Stitchy came from, he's actually not an original character. He actually is a character, an SCP from Minitoon's old SCP game. And if we look at the model, the original model for Mr. Stitchy, which is the model that he would have had at the time of this chapter coming out, you can see there are the 2 eyes. Now, of course, they're a little orange, but, you know, orange, red, maybe Minitoon just, you know, whatever. Okay, the eyes are orange, man, but he's got the 2 eyes. There it is right there. He's got the 2 eyes. There it is. Maybe this is what George saw outside his window every night because the Insolence and Mr. Stitchy knew all this was happening. They're the reason behind the Piggy family getting infected. They're the reason Mr. P got blamed for all of this, and they're the reason all of this started. I think it's a pretty good theory. I think this makes sense. I think it ties in a lot of loose ends here. Now, of course, this is my theory. The only thing that is for certain is that Mr. P is not responsible, and of course, if he's not responsible, who else could it be? Bunny? Like, probably not. It's probably the Insolence. So I think most of this makes sense. Of course, let me know what you think about all this down below in the comment section. I'm going to be reading through all the comments, and also remember, if you haven't yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Keep using the star code real quick when you're buying your Robux and Roblox Premium. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later today for a brand new video. Bye!